Well, can you believe it? Week 6 is done. We're going to be heading into Week 7. But first, a look back at Week 6. Welcome into the State Champs Extra Point Podcast. My name is Sean Baligian. I'm sitting in for Lauren Plant today. Of course, Matthew Mowery is here. Scott Burnstein is here. Jon Kidd is here. Look at our boy over there. Always taking care of business.
On the wheels
Kevin.
of steel.
Always
KT.
taking care of business. Before we get into the action, always got to make sure that we thank our sponsors. Thanks to Lawrence Tech. Love everything that you guys do. MHSAA, thank you. Without you, we wouldn't be here. And, of course, Hungry Howie's. And might I add, try the Cajun crust all over the pizza.
I get the Cajun crust with the butter Parmesan. I mix them.
Try it all over the pizza
it's good,
as
man.
well. All right, the featured games from Week 6, and Bernie, we're going to start with you. It's interesting. Lakeland knocks off Walled Lake Western by a score of 28-7.
Pretty comfortable fashion.
See, that's what I wanted to say to you. Somebody might say, what's going on with Walled Lake Western? Perhaps the question should be, what's going on with Lakeland?
Yeah, well, I think there are two big takeaways from this game. First off, Robbie Tracy, Lakeland senior running back, has a license to thrill. I'm gonna nickname him the Bogey Lake Boogeyman. This guy gives coordinators and opposing defenders nightmares with what he can do with the slicing and dicing through lines. He ran for 282 and 4 touchdowns. Really a career game for him, and he runs so much bigger than his actual size. I've seen him a couple times now, and this is the first time I was actually face-to-face with him after a game, and I was expecting I was like, Case, can someone get me Tracy? A lot of the guys had taken off their pads and their jerseys, so they didn't have numbers on. I was like, hey, can you get me Tracy? And they brought him over, and I kind of did a double take. I was expecting this kind of bruising, broad-shouldered, like a TJ Duckett type, because he runs, he's not an edge runner. He goes right up in between the tackles. But he's a tiny guy. He's only about 5'7", 5'8", maybe. He runs with such heart and such determination and such grit. And he had over 1,000 yards last year as a junior, and this year I believe he's edging towards 1,000, if not over 1,000. And just this is one of the best rushing performances I've seen this year. Just gouging that Walled Lake Western defense, gashing them play after play. Took the first handoff of the game, went 80 yards for the touchdown, went to the house, scored in every quarter, and like I said, 282, and was just lights out all night. The other takeaway is that Walled Lake Western has a real Achilles heel. The kryptonite to Walled Lake Western is physicality, and the game against Lakeland in Week 6 was almost a carbon copy of what we saw in Week 1 with Catholic Central. And I think the Lakeland coaches really watched that tape and realized that they play maybe a similar style to Catholic Central and implemented a lot of stuff that they saw on that tape. And, right now it looks like Walled Lake Western is strictly a finesse team with a lot of big-time Division I recruits at finesse positions, quarterbacks, wide receivers, C.J. Brown, who's their stud safety, who's now rushing the football. But if you smack this team in the nose and play traditional smash mouth football, they have a lot of problems.
Interesting.
And they got to get that defense fixed. C.J. Brown got slowed down in the running game after going over 100 yards the last 2 weeks. He only had about 30 yards this week. And then it was just, Sam Johnson, your Boston College-bound quarterback, is really good, but he can only do so much. And he was like, I think, 12 of 18 for about 230, ran in a 15-yard touchdown at the end of the half to make it 14-7. But, if he has no rushing game and your defense is continually giving up these big plays, you're kind of wasting your big-time 4-star quarterback. So those are my two takeaways from that game.
By the way, before I forget, these are games that were all featured on State Champs TV, and you can check them out on our website now, statechamps.net.
And last thing I'll say about kind of the overall look of what's going on in the LVC, Lakeland has won 3 straight now after losing 2 in a row to Mott and South Lyon, and that LVC race is just jumbled up like you would have never expected at the start of the year. And we said on the football forecast, we talked about how the coaches poll before the season had ranked Lakeland and Walled Lake Western as your co-favorites. Well, right now it's a crapshoot. You got Lakeland South Lyon's on top all by itself.
5-0.
Then you got Walled Lake Western and South Lyon East. Then
4-1.
Then you got Mott and Lakeland
At 4-2, yeah. And
So you
the
got 6 teams.
next 2 weeks is going to kind of hash that out because you've got East and Western play, and then South Lyon and Mott play next week. And then the week after that, it's South Lyon and Walled Lake Western, and Mott gets Northern, and South Lyon East has Milford. And then the final week of the season, South Lyon and South Lyon East. So next 3 weeks, it's going to be probably going to go right down to the wire. And I think like we said in the preview show, that we kind of thought maybe it would be decided by that Mott Western game, and it certainly has not been. Primarily because those South Lyon schools have become, factors in a race that maybe we didn't think they would be.
What an emphatic statement by South Lyon East to beat up on Waterford Mott like they did, 37-6.
A lot of turnovers.
And they got a coach, I want to shout out, Joe Pacey, who is a Farmington Hills Harrison John Harrington disciple. He played quarterback for Harrington. I believe his brother also did in the 1990s. And he's coming over there and really instilling some excitement and a lot of discipline and a lot of really
defense.
quality football, fundamentally sound football over at South Lyon East.
They've given up 57 points in 6 games. I mean, when you just over a touchdown, between a touchdown and a field goal, per game, you're in some games, and that's primarily been what they did. I think that's how they beat Mott, wasn't it, with a bunch of turnovers and kind of a defensive struggle.
Well, another game that we're going to be talking about a little bit, Temperance Bedford. You wanted us out there. We came out there. Monroe comes away with a 41-6 victory. Monroe 5-1 now on the season.
Yeah, only got stopped once in 7 possessions. I mean, when you score on 6 out of 7 possessions, you're probably going to have a good day. And it was kind of a little bit of everybody. Malik Linton was 5 for 7 passing, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran for 2 touchdowns. It's Monroe looks like they have a shot. Serious shot, because they have Pioneer 3-3, and Saline is the other team in that SEC that's is right there. If Saline gets past Huron, which they should, 0-6 team, and Monroe gets past Pioneer, we're looking at essentially an OAA Red showdown between Monroe and SEC Red showdown on October 12th between those two teams. And great for a program like Monroe that's not necessarily been one of the powerhouses in that conference to kind of take their turn.
And they also got the Golden Cleat Trophy for
Love
the
it.
first time in
Love
4
it.
years. We love those trophies.
That's absolutely. By the way, what's interesting is we move on to Fortson in Belleville. Coach Jermaine Crowell said his players have to stop looking at the headlines. Maybe that would be easier if they would stop making the headlines. That's a big win, and in a big win, you want your big-time players to step up. Yeah. And by all accounts, Belleville's big-time players stepped up.
I talked about on the football forecast that this was going to really be a underclassmen, upperclassmen battle under center. And Christian Dewey Reed played excellent, the underclassmen quarterback for Belleville. 4 touchdowns on the day, 3 through the air. And then I also predicted Julian Barnett would break out on offense. He had a 50-yard. I know he had at least one 50-yard touchdown hookup with Dewey Reed. And but I will, give Fortune credit. I said, I think on the predictions that I thought this would be a 2-touchdown victory for Belleville, but Fortune was right in there to the very end.
29-26 final. And Barnett had a couple, right?
I know he had one.
Two.
Yeah, Barnett had 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
When I first saw Julian Barnett, which it was either the end of his freshman year or the start of his sophomore year, someone told me I need to go see this kid, and I ended up I forgot who they were playing, and I went and watched him, and I was just blown away by his home run potential as a wide receiver.
Sure.
And then move into the summer after before his junior year, he's being slotted as a corner. But I really think he can't, wherever he lands in college, and he's obviously going to Michigan State as a defensive back, but I would not be shocked if somehow he ends up on the other side of the ball, because he's a burner back there.
Well, we said this right off the jump when we talked about the teams moving from the Western Wayne to the KLA East, that this was going to be better for them, because both of them, Belleville and Fortson, kind of, aside from when they played each other, had such an easy run of it in that conference that didn't make them better. And you looked at the disparity, and specifically from the Belleville standpoint, you looked at the disparity of their scores in league and then against the 3 KLAA opponents they played, including Canton in the playoffs when they lost. It was mind-boggling because they were beating, the teams in their league by 40 points, and then they were playing KLAA teams and winning, a couple by 2 or 3 and losing one by, I think, 7 in the playoffs. Both of these teams, regardless of what the outcome was of this game, both of these teams are going to be better come playoff time for having played the competition and getting through this gauntlet. I mean, 3 of Belleville's 6 wins have come by a total of 13 points. Week 1 against Brighton when they had to come back in the last minute. This Fordson game, and I believe it was Westland Glen that they had to kind of sneak by at the very end. It teaches you how to finish. And when you're playing your stars in the fourth quarter and they're getting that experience of that, oh my gosh, we could lose this game, as opposed to, sitting on the bench and, taking selfies or whatever you're doing in a 40-point blowout, this is a good thing for both of these programs. And it didn't go the way Fordson wanted it to. And this was kind of their shot to, make a real statement and, and probably bump way up in the rankings. But come playoff time, both of these teams are going to be better for this.
I mean, Ajami is an electric quarterback for Fordson. So, anytime you got a talent like that, you give yourself a pretty good chance. And
Jafar is running mate in the backfield. Right. Yeah, they've got weapons all over.
This is Extra Point Week 6. The gang is all here. Johnny Kidd, you were in PSL territory. Oh, yeah. This is one that we talked about. Western and Osborne, we thought that this might be a defensive battle. Both of these defenses have been so good this year. John, by all accounts, this was a defensive battle.
Yeah, and credit Osborne. This was their first division title in school history. And Western going into the game, too, they were also going for their first division title ever, too. School's been around for 100 years and never a football.
Yeah, when you think of Detroit Western, you think of baseball. Right?
And basketball.
And basketball with McDowell more recently.
And Western beat Osborne 24-0 last year. And, with the realignments of the PSL, they were in the same division this year. Osborne got up 12-0. Western made a comeback quick, but Osborne with 2 key interceptions in the second half, and they won, and now they're division champs and probably going to make the playoffs here. One more win gets them in the playoffs.
Great story. I love hearing stories like that. I know we're going to get to one in a little bit up north, but you got to love hearing stories like that. It's also
cool to, last week we talked about, some of the under-the-radar gems in the PSL. We talked about Todd Stewart at Mumford, and, now we're you got a guy like Osborne under center, like Isaiah Watts, and, you have these guys that, aren't getting the big time offers and aren't getting the headlines because if you're not Cass or King, you kind of get forgotten about in the PSL.
Sure.
But whether you're talking about Stewart over at Mumford or Watts over at Osborne, those are playmakers. Those are game changing talents in the pocket.
Right, and this is a quick turnaround too, because this is a 1-8 team last year that got shut out 4 times.
Wow!
And for them to have that, you mentioned the defense, only giving up 44 points in 6 games. Osborne they had a streak from 73 to 87 where they, had 15 straight seasons without a losing season. But since then, they've only had 6 winning seasons. So to have one of these kind of years, as you said, everybody in the PSL basically gets lost in the wash behind, King and Cass that get so much of the attention. But this is a good story, and congratulations to these kids for having something to,
And kids that go to Osborne, PS, those are tough kids.
Yeah.
That is a tough neighborhood. Yeah. And those are kids that when they hit the gridiron, they mean business.
It's interesting. River Rouge, week 1. You both mentioned Cass. Everybody said don't read too much into that. This is a good River Rouge team, and all they've done is go on and prove that. They win going away at Harper Woods by a score of 35-7, John.
And then we found out before the game, 2 of Harper Woods' quarterbacks were ineligible for the game.
The first stringer, Corey Graham, and then the backup, who I'm not sure who that is. But so they had to play like a JV kid at quarterback.
And it'd be interesting to see how it's going to all play out if they're going to be ineligible for those other games earlier in the year. Are
there going to have to be forfeits?
Yeah, it depends. Well, and anytime you see a situation like that, and you know it going into it, you see a bunch of kids who transfer all at once, your eyebrow goes up. And it doesn't mean that there's necessarily anything wrong. It's just one of those where when it eventually comes out, you go, nah, yeah. And it sucks for the kids, and frankly, it sucks for this game because we had all kind of circled this as this was the time where both of them would be tested, and it stinks that you get to this point and you don't have the kids on the field that you kind of predicted would be in that
early red flags, like within the first couple days of Rod Oden taking that job. I don't remember if it was the Free Press or the News, but one of the big dailies reported that there were a number of kids that immediately transferred and their paperwork was fishy. I don't, like I said, I don't remember if it was the Free Press or News, but it was that first week that Oden moved over there, and a couple of the kids I know got blocked from making the move because they were kind of lying about their addresses or whatnot. So, they've been under the microscope, and someone kind of pulled a card early or at the end of last week, I guess, and reported them for. I don't know what they reported with Corey Graham. I mean.
Well, I think that was the second week he'd missed, wasn't it? Somebody said that, he was gone last week, I think.
So I'm not exactly sure what the issue is, but, he's one of the cogs, one of the key cogs in that motor that runs that offense. And, he's a guy that has, obviously there's the Jordan Andersons and the Elijah Griffins and Rashawn Gullies, the big Division I prospects, but that offense doesn't do what it does or do what it had been doing those first 5 weeks without Corey Graham, and then you take away the backup and you ask them to go into a huge showdown like that with a kid that's never played on the varsity level. I mean, you're at a severe disadvantage.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And then also too, credit River Rouge. We lost.
Oh, Manny Fresh was living up to the nickname, and
the weather was bad right before the game. It rained off and on, but I thought River Rouge, they had to change their game plan a little bit, and it was just a running attack, and it was mostly Emmanuel Ferguson. Yeah. He's really has taken that offense by storm.
We were just talking a second ago. We're talking about Osborne, tough kids. I mean, Manny Fresh, Emmanuel Ferguson, he is tough as nails. He's the type of guy that isn't afraid of contact. He'll stay in the pocket to make the throw when he knows he's going to get knocked on his tush. He'll take off and initiate contact when he's running. Almost to the point where you're like, hit the sideline. You don't need to go head first into the middle linebacker. But that type of behavior on the field and that type of that mentality, inspires the teammates around him, and it kind of infuses them with that same mindset, and that's why River Rouge is 5-1 right now, and they they've been to the Final Four, I think 3 straight years, and they have a great chance to go back and make a run to Ford Field again.
They took care of business. I mean, that's one of those games too where you see all the turmoil on the other side, and you can goof around and think you might have an easy game, and you got to credit them for not, and for kind of putting the pedal down and doing what they had to get through that game and get a win. Because there's really, I mean, in that case, there's no win scenario for them other than just get through this game, because all you can do is have bad things happen if you take it lightly.
Great story continues on the Sunrise side of the state. Oscoda, we talked about it just a few days ago, finally had a share of a division title, their first since 1976. They had something to prove, Matt. I know you're familiar with that area. I'm so happy for their community. They knock off Tawas by a score of 50-15. They have got to be celebrating in Oscoda right now.
You would think they're dancing in the ruins of Wirt Smith Air Force Base. Yeah, it's one where that program has been kind of dormant, and it always had the potential of being something, but they just could never seem to quite put it together. And I think they still have to beat Whittemore Prescott before they can clinch it, correct?
Yep.
And that's, trust me, that's no easy task.
Yep.
Yeah, but they've got 5 wins now, and they've only had more than 5 wins in a season 4 times in the last 42 years since that last title. And it was 99, 2000, back-to-back playoff years at 7 wins, 2015 and 2017. So it's been recently, aside from that one little blip that they've gotten good. They've won the last 2 against Whittemore Prescott, but they'd lost the last 15. So that's been one that's been kind of their... And Whittemore Prescott, for a large portion of the 90s and 2000s, was just dominated that area of the state. So, and it's obviously not that same Whittemore Prescott program, but there still are some, that's still a tough out. So...
Well, the last of our featured games, this was a matchup between two 4-0 teams. By all accounts, it sounded like a good game. Hillman, eight player, of course.
Yep.
Hillman gets the win at home, 38-34. Check that. Hillman had one loss. Posen ends up losing 38-34. Hillman with the victory at home.
A classic heavyweight championship prize fight, just standing in the center of the ring, exchanging blows. Hillman and Posen hadn't played in 10 years, renewed the rivalry, and I believe it was Gabe Steineke with the game-winning score. And, anytime you got over 70 points scored in a game, again, when you're talking about two rivals, it's worth the price of admission. And Corey Hennigan and those Hillman footballers really got the job done.
And anytime you think of 8-player football, a lot of times, and we talked about this in the previous show too, it tends to be a little more wide open, a little more passing oriented, a little more. That was never, when in the heyday, that was never Hillman football. Hillman football was load up the box, jumbo set, we're going to pound it down your throat. And I think that's the interesting kind of twist that they bring to 8-player football, is that's still the mentality they want to have. And when they had that game-winning drive, it was 11 plays, and it took nearly 6 minutes off the clock before Steineke scored from 4 yards out. But that's kind of the interesting twist that they wanted to, that they're still going to ground and pound at Hillman, and it's effective sometimes when even though most people are going to more spread out formations. And it'll be interesting to watch them over the next couple of years and see how that manifests itself, and see if they still carry on kind of that tradition. But it's always fun when you get little school rivals, especially ones that, as we mentioned, they're not far apart. They're 12 miles apart, I think, and
which makes it even more special that they renewed this rivalry.
Yep.
They hadn't played in 10 years,
Yeah.
and that there's that short distance between them.
Other games of interest around the state, we're going to blow through these, get some thoughts from the guys on a couple of them. What do you say about Mr. Brown? All he does is win. I mean, that's just the way it is. Madison Heights Madison knocks off previously unbeaten Farmington by a score of 28-6. Bernie, I know you had an eye on this one.
Yeah, well, when you're talking about Austin Brown, you're talking about one of the best quarterbacks in the state of Michigan. You're talking about someone who is just a playmaking machine, someone who can dissect defenses, someone who can lead in the huddle, someone who's going to beat you with their mind, beat you with their arm, and beat you with their legs. Just such a special player, and he's now won 40 games at the high school level.
Unbelievable.
And even more than that, he's got 6,000 career yards and almost 100 career touchdowns. I mean, that's just... Those are the games when you play video games on easy level. That's what that is.
I really hope that he goes to Marshall. And I'm going to throw out another reference point. People know I love the amazing Jason Alessi. And Alessi went to Yale initially for lacrosse, but ended up being an all Ivy League safety as a quarterback as well. He was all Ivy League in 2 sports. So I would love to see Austin Brown. He's going to Marshall for baseball. He's talked about how he's probably going to walk on for football there. I would love to see him become a 2-sport standout down in West Virginia and just show all those in Appalachia what we got up here in the Mitten in a talent like Austin Brown, because he is a firecracker of a talent.
We'll get to Matt Mowery's rankings updates momentarily. Matt, I know you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things is I think people looked at this and went, "Oh, this is a Mac Silver against an OA Blue. Oh, isn't that cute? These are too cute." Okay, you look at Madison's playoff points after 6 weeks of the season, and there are only 5 other teams that have more points in this, not in Class C, in the state. It's Jackson is tied with them with 100 playoff points. Chip Valley, DeWitt, Belleville, and Muskegon. Those are the only other teams that have more playoff points than Madison right now. They're probably, more than likely, unless anything weird happens over the last couple of weeks, they're going to go into the playoffs as the number 1 seed in their division, and they're going to have a ton of playoff points.
Some of the other games that we covered last week, just to blow through some scores, Jackson gets a win. Their magic season continues. They knock off Ypsilanti Lincoln in convincing fashion, 39-14. How about Lapeer rolling? They rolled over Grand Blanc by a score of 42-10.
Brady Apple, the quarterback for Lapeer. I've been thinking about that for the last couple days. I had to throw that one.
You cut straight up the middle of the state, Saginaw Swan Valley. I was following on Twitter, Saginaw Swan Valley at Alma. How did that turn out?
Well, and Alma knew that they were going to have to play an almost perfect game, to beat Swan Valley, because Swan Valley is a machine and they've got it rolling. It did not go that way. They matched touchdowns for the first couple of drives, and Breck Allward, who came into the game for Alma having over 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns in 5 games, took one up the middle, 68 yards, split a crease, and at that point you thought, oh, well, we're going to have a shootout. Didn't turn out that way. Terrion Liddell picked off a pass. I believe it was the next drive or the drive after for Alma. Picked off a pass for Swan Valley, took it back to the house, and after that it was just, Swan Valley just poured it on. You look at the two teams personnel-wise, and Alma's got, Drew Hum at quarterback and Breck Allward in the backfield and Jacob Torres, who had a couple of long kick returns. They've got the skill position players, similar, maybe not quite the level of the Swan Valley kids, but at least comparable. The biggest difference is on the lines. And Swan Valley's got a bunch of 3-year starters, a bunch of big boys. Alma had to replace all 5 of their offensive linemen coming off last year, and that was the main difference. They just could not open creases for Allward.
34-6, your final there. Elsewhere, Mount Pleasant, they stay unbeaten. They knock off Midland 40-20. Dansville with a big victory over Fowler at Dansville 40-9. This looked like an interesting one. We had talked Grozeal hadn't been at home. There's no place like home. They knock off Monroe St. Mary's CC by a score of 33-14. And this looked like a good one as well. Flint Hamady knocks off Goodrich by a score of 34-28. Yes, the Martians. You got to love that.
Hamady 6-0 for the first time since 1980.
There's another great story. Love seeing that. Yep. Hey, listen, don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Matt Mowery will update his rankings. We also want to update you on some of the other things going on as well, including the Anvil Award. Just an outstanding addition to the State Champs playbook. And we'll talk about that coming up as well. This is Extra Point Week 6. Don't go anywhere.
I want to be a dermatologist, and though a lot of universities tried to recruit me for basketball, Lawrence Tech had the science curriculum that I wanted. LTU's Southfield campus is a great place to learn, and the classes are small enough that I don't have to wait for office hours to talk to my professors. They're usually right by my side, challenging me and guiding me toward a successful future. Lawrence Tech. Possible is everything.
You ready, Darius?
Let's do it. Anybody want an autograph?
Autograph? We're here for the stuffed crust pizza.
Stuffed crust pizza? Hey, who do you think you are? End of the line, pal.
Flavor fanatics love stuffing their faces with our stuffed flavored crust. Get one for only $2 more on any large original round pizza.
Hungry? Howie's!
Today, let's talk about a new rule for the soccer season. There's a change in soccer rules this year on plays where a defender denies an obvious goal-scoring opportunity within their own penalty area. The penalty has been amended depending on whether or not the referee determines that the defensive player was attempting to play the ball when committing the foul. If so, the defender will receive a yellow card rather than a red card, and a penalty kick will be awarded. Here are a couple examples where the defender was playing the ball, which now results in a yellow card. This eliminates the previous double jeopardy on the play, a PK, and a red card. Of course, in those circumstances where there was no attempt to play the ball, the defender is still disqualified. Here's an example of a play where a red card would be issued. This brings the high school rule in line with college and international rules. For more information about soccer, visit the MHSAA website.
All right, welcome back in. It is Extra Point Week 6. So glad you can join us. Again, always want to make sure that we share some love with our sponsors, LTU. We appreciate you greatly. The MHSAA and Hungry Howies. As I said, make sure Matt is working on a new ranking as well. There was some debate off the air. Now, we can't share that footage with you. We can't let you into the inner sanctum of state champs, but there was some debates off the air, and Matt will have that for you, so make sure you follow Matt. If you don't already, make sure you follow Matt on the social media, on Twitter, etc., etc. Guys, let's move on. I said this before. I thought this was a great idea. I don't know who came up with the idea, but they deserve a raise.
It was Lou, the boss, the big boss man.
We're not giving the boss a raise, but no, great idea. You know, before we had our Hungry Howie's Player of the Year, and it's so hard if you're a lineman to get the love in a situation like that. So we created the Anvil Award, and guys, to put it mildly, Matt, we have a pretty good competition going on.
Yeah, we've got some guys on the watch list that you would think, oh, these are slam dunks to be, leading the pack, and they haven't even, kind of bumped up into the top 10 yet. I think both of the Clarkston kids, Spindler and Dellinger, are on the watch list, and yeah, it's just so deep.
The state of Michigan has had such a run in the last handful of years on the big nasties in the trenches, guys that are obviously high-level power conference recruits, like the guys we have on this award candidate list right now. But really, I'll just throw out two of the names on our list right now, like guys like Logan Brown and Devontae Dobbs. I'm not trying not to get too ahead of ourselves here, but these are guys that have legitimate opportunities to be first-round NFL draft picks, and maybe other guys on this list too. But those are the two 5 stars that pop out at me, and guys that they have the athleticism, the agility, the size, and the technique at the point of attack to really thrive at the next level. And Devontae's going to Michigan State, Logan's going to Wisconsin. They'll be rivals at the college level. A couple years back, we had an offensive lineman from the state of Michigan go number 1 in the NFL draft, and Eric Fisher from Stony Creek, who's anchoring the line with the Kansas City Chiefs right now in that explosive offense. So the talent, the guys that that are doing the dirty work in the shadows. And that's why this award is so special. These guys are so were so handicapped in the race for Mr. Football, just because the metrics are, it's difficult to gauge, what they're doing on the line when you compare it. Well, maybe not difficult to gauge, but difficult to compare it to when a guy's throwing the ball, throwing for 3,000 yards and 35 touchdowns, as opposed to the guy that's keeping his jersey clean.
Sure. And what intrigues me, minus Rogers, since he's the only junior on the list, the other 9, they're committed and they're staying committed. You don't hear about this kid's going to look at this school, even though I'm going to decommit. These 9 are solid to their schools.
Hard commits. And Bradford's Anthony Bradford Muskegon's going down to the SEC to play at LSU. Justin Rogers, the one junior on this list, has kind of made it known to the recruiting world that he doesn't want to stay in state, that it looks like it's either going to be Ohio State or an SEC school.
Kentucky.
That's what blows my mind. I mean, you're seeing more and more SEC schools kind of matriculate up here, and players matriculate down there. It's amazing how much that's increased in recent years.
But then you also could have situations like over at Notre Dame right now, Khalid Kareem, who's having a great year with the Fighting Irish. He committed to Alabama, and then the last second switched gears and went to Notre Dame. So sometimes that allure of going to play in the SEC. Can kind of get you maybe a little punch drunk, and then once you come to your senses, I want to stay in the Midwest, and
it's playing out for him.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
He's doing okay.
Well, much like our Hungry Howie's
rookies going to Clemson.
Yeah, that's much like our Hungry Howie's award as well for Player of the Year. This is all about you guys. You guys got to get on there and vote. Leading the way right now, the Laker from West Bloomfield, Lance Dixon, leading the way. And much like the Hungry Howie's Player of the Year, listen, you're automatically in there. If you get the online vote, you're automatically in there. and we're going to decide. It's a fun process to kind of decide, who eventually gets the award. But certainly, we wanted to make you a part of it as well.
We got 4 Michigan State Spartans on this list: Berghorst, Lewis, Fletcher, and Devontae. And a note about Lance Dixon, the kind of all-everything outside linebacker, viper, safety for West Bloomfield, All-American. He's going to be at the Army All-American game in January. He was down at in Happy Valley this weekend on the sidelines. Watching that Penn State-Ohio State game.
What a great atmosphere.
And he brought, on possibly talking about future Anvil Award list candidates, he brought his buddy Makari Page, who's a junior, 4-star recruit, as a safety outside linebacker combo as well. They were both down at the Penn State game. And then his other linebacker running mate, Cornell Wheeler, committed to Michigan. So, West Bloomfield has 3 guys in the linebacking core that all could make strong arguments for being on this list right now.
That's what I was going to point out. To talk about the depth of this, we've got 10 guys on here who are all going to Power 5 schools, and some of them going very, very, high level. We've got 3 guys that are on the watch list or should be on the watch list if they're not, that are going to Michigan that aren't even sniffing the top. Tyrese Woods from Belleville. We've got Maisie Smith from East Kentwood and Cornell Wheeler, who just committed to Michigan. All of those guys are going to Michigan. They're really, really, really good players, and they're not even on our top 10 yet. And that's not because we think they're not good players, because they clearly do. That's just indicative of what the depth is like in this state, in the state, in these particular areas.
I called Matt right after I finished up my my state champs top 50 players in the state, and I'm like, the depth is insane. I got a guy at number 33 that's committed to Michigan. 33.
Right. Well, you know what, and Matt, to your point, and Bernie, I know you can speak on this. This is also an indicator to how far this state has come. It wasn't that long ago. People, Ohio, Texas, Florida, and they still are. Make no mistake about it. But Michigan is fertile ground now.
And I think they're more spread out now. Than they were, let's say, 20, 30 years ago. You were always getting a lot from Detroit, Metro Detroit, but you weren't getting from the west side of the state like we have now, and from other parts of the mitten.
Well, when we talked a couple of weeks ago with the recruiting report, when you get kids from Joburg that are popping up in recruiting circles, or kids from Whittemore Prescott, or kids going to Penn State from it's all over the map. Yeah, is that all? Yeah. Kids that are all over the map that are going to the state, they will find you if you play and you play well. And like you said, it's the depth is just amazing across the board.
And it's not a coincidence that Ohio State all of a sudden in the last 5 years has found a way into Michigan after all those years where they really ignored the state.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah. And obviously the Alabamas, the Auburns, the Georgias, the Clemsons are coming up here with a much more frequency. I believe rookie at River Rouge, the defensive end that's going to Clemson, is the first player from the state of Michigan to go to Clemson in at least like 40, 50 years. I don't know, maybe there was someone back in the 50s and 60s are going, but from the 70s forward, we haven't had anyone that has gone to Clemson.
Well, listen, folks, make sure that you check that out. Go to statechamps.net. You can be a part of the process, and a big part of the process as well. Again, the online winner automatically moves on. That's just the way it is. That's how we want to thank you for being a part of that. So make sure that you participate in the Anvil Award and the Mr. Football races. Also, we want to send a shout out before we're out of here to LTU, MHSAA, Hungry Howie's, and remind you that we're all going to reconvene in just a couple days, and you guys can check out the football forecast, which premieres every Thursday at 3 o'clock. Kevin, thank you as always. Matt Mowery has a busy day. He's got that ranking thing to figure out. I don't envy him of that.
We might have to mic him up, get him in the war room, and then kind of do it as a special pot.
I was going to say Matt having arguments with Matt. That would be really good. Bernie, always a pleasure. You're all over things. Johnny, you're always out there. For everybody involved, I'm Sean Baligian. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for checking us out on State Champs.